Hello, and welcome back to The Will to Wisdom. In our ongoing exploration of Arthur Schopenhauer's profound, often unsettling philosophy, we've been delving into his metaphysics of sexual love. We've peeled back the layers, understanding it not just as a personal feeling, but as a powerful drive orchestrated by something far larger than ourselves, the will to live, or what we've called the spirit of the species. We've seen how this force, relentless and irrational, uses a brilliant, perhaps even cruel trick to achieve its sole objective, the perpetuation of life, the continuation of the species. It wraps this objective in a dazzling cloak, an irresistible illusion, making the pursuit of union with a particular individual feel like the absolute highest good, the promise of infinite happiness. But what happens when the chase ends? When the goal pursued with such fervor, such sacrifice is finally attained? Does the promised infinite happiness arrive? Does the dazzling illusion continue to shine? Today, in part 3 of our deep dive into Schopenhauer's metaphysics of sexual love, we confront a moment of stark revelation. We're going to explore what happens after the climax of this driven pursuit, the fading of the illusion, the desengaño, the return to a different, perhaps more sober, reality. This isn't just about romance. It's about understanding the fundamental forces that drive us, the nature of desire itself, and the often painful gap between our expectations and the reality of existence, as illuminated by one of philosophy's most challenging thinkers. So, if you're ready to look beyond the dazzling light and into the inevitable shadows, join me as we uncover the end of the illusion. The nature of the illusion re-examined. To truly appreciate the end of the illusion, we must first firmly grasp its nature and power. Schopenhauer lays it out with unflinching clarity in chapter 44 of Volume 2 of The World as Will and Representation, a chapter he himself called a pearl. He starts by acknowledging the sheer, undeniable presence of sexual love in human life and art. It is the constant theme, the hidden engine, the source of endless stories, drama, and poetry. La Rochefoucauld and Lichtenberg may have questioned its reality, viewing it as mere fantasy or not rooted in nature. But Schopenhauer rejects this. Experience, even if not daily, confirms its reality. It can become a passion of such vehemence that it surpasses all others, overriding reason, breaking through obstacles, driving individuals to risk, sacrifice, or even end their lives. The records of courts and newspapers, the cases of madness and suicide linked to love, are grim testaments to its power. But why does this small matter have such immense power, causing so much disturbance and confusion in otherwise regulated human life? Schopenhauer answers directly, because it is not a small matter. Its importance is precisely measured by the seriousness and fervor with which it is pursued. The ultimate aim of all love affairs, whether they are acted out in high drama or low comedy, is nothing less than the composition of the next generation. It is through this seemingly frivolous relationship that the very existence and constitution of the dramatis personae, who will appear when we are gone, are determined. Schopenhauer explains that what manifests in individual consciousness as a general sexual impulse, not directed at any specific person, is, in itself, the pure will to live. But when this impulse is directed toward a particular individual of the opposite sex, it is the will to live desiring to objectify itself as a specifically determined individual. Nature needs a trick, a stratagem to achieve this. The sexual impulse, which is subjective in itself, skillfully puts on the mask of objective admiration, deceiving consciousness. The individual, driven by this instinct, believes they are pursuing their own pleasure, their own happiness. The illusion is that possessing this particular person will bring extraordinary, perhaps infinite happiness. This promise becomes so radiant in the highest degrees of infatuation that life itself loses value if it cannot be achieved. The individual's will is, in a sense, swallowed up by the will of the species. This explains why love can make individuals act against their own best interests, against reason, honor, duty, and fidelity. The interest of the species is infinitely more important than the temporary interests of mere individuals. Schopenhauer emphasizes that this intense focus on a specific individual is driven by unconscious considerations aimed at perfecting the species type and creating a specific, necessary individual. It's why instinct, not objective assessment, guides the deepest levels of attraction. Beauty, health, strength, youth, these are prioritized because the will, via the spirit of the species, first and foremost, wants to perpetuate the specific character of the human species. Then comes the unconscious evaluation of complementary qualities to correct or neutralize one's own imperfections, ensuring the best possible offspring. This overwhelming transport that seizes a man at the sight of a suitable woman is the sense of the species recognizing its mark and desiring its perpetuation through her. This mechanism is seen most clearly in animals, where instinct's role is more evident. Schopenhauer uses the examples of insects driven by specific instincts, seeking a particular flower or prey for laying eggs, comparing this care and disregard for personal danger to the intense, irrational pursuits of humans driven by sexual love. He notes that humans are perhaps unique in having this powerful, complicated instinct. While we could understand the ultimate goal, procreation, we wouldn't pursue it with the necessary zeal, even at the cost of our individual well-being. So, nature employs the illusion of immense personal pleasure to achieve its impersonal, species-level goal. The desire for the loved one, this emeros, as the Greeks called it, which poets struggle endlessly to capture, promising infinite happiness and bringing untold sorrow if unfulfilled, cannot stem from the needs of an ephemeral individual. It is the sigh of the spirit of the species itself, on the verge of gaining or losing an irreplaceable means to its ends. Only the species has infinite life and is capable of infinite desires, infinite satisfaction, and infinite sorrows. This infinite drive is compressed into the limited chest of a mortal, leading to the feeling that the chest might burst and the inability to articulate the presentiment of infinite pleasure or pain. This is the source of high erotic, the attainment, and the awakening. Now, we arrive at the crucial turning point. The chase is over. The sacrifices have been made. The union, so ardently pursued under the radiant banner of infinite promised happiness, has occurred. What happens in this moment? Schopenhauer, with his characteristic realism, some might say pessimism, delivers the punchline. He notes that the true purpose is achieved with the attainment of the object of desire. And then, every infatuated person, after having finally obtained the pleasure experiences a strange disappointment. They are astonished that what they so ardently craved gives nothing more than any other sexual satisfaction. The promised infinite happiness, the transcendent bliss, the culmination of all earthly aspirations, turns out to be just physical satisfaction. Schopenhauer explains this stark disillusionment. The desire, while active, stood to all other desires, as the species stands to the individual as an infinite thing to a finite one. Its satisfaction, however, properly benefits only the species. It does not truly enter the consciousness of the individual as the promised infinite gain. The individual, animated by the will of the species, served a purpose that was absolutely not their own, despite their illusion. After completing this great work, the act of union that could lead to new life, the individual finds himself deceived. The illusion has disappeared. Schopenhauer states, through which, here the individual was the plaything of the species. He uses strong analogies to drive the point home. Plato's observation that pleasure is the most boastful thing, promising much but delivering little. The mythical figure of Theseus, who, after his adventures, abandoned Ariadne, a parallel to the satisfied lover abandoning the object of their former obsession. Or the song of a bird falling silent after the eggs are laid, the biological purpose fulfilled. The instinctual drive subsides. The passion was based on an illusion that made what was valuable only for the species seem precious to the individual. It is only natural, then, that this deception vanishes once the species' purpose has been achieved. The spirit of the species, which had taken possession of the individual, leaves him free again, and thus, abandoned by this overwhelming force, the individual falls back into his original limitation and misery. They are left with the astonishing realization that their intense, heroic, infinite aspirations resulted in a pleasure no different from any other sexual satisfaction. Contrary to his expectation, he is not happier than before. He realizes he has been deceived by the will of the species. This realization, this desengaño, a Spanish term Schopenhauer appreciated, meaning disillusionment or disappointment, reveals the negative nature of pleasure itself within Schopenhauer's system. Pleasure is not a positive state. It is merely the cessation of suffering or lack. The intense desire was a form of suffering or lack. Its satisfaction removes that specific lack, but does not install a state of lasting, positive happiness. New desires, new lacks, new forms of suffering inevitably arise. This is why pursuing positive happiness through satisfying desires is, in Schopenhauer's view, ultimately futile. The end of the illusion in sexual love is a particularly poignant instance of this universal truth about desire and suffering. The intensity of the illusion made the subsequent return to original limitation and misery all the more jarring. Achieving the object of sexual love, far from bringing promised infinite happiness, marks the dissolution of the illusion that drove the pursuit. The individual realizes they were a tool for the species' goal, and the resulting feeling is one of disappointment and a return to their ordinary state of suffering and limitation. Real world echoes and consequences. Schopenhauer's philosophical argument, while abstract, finds echoes in countless human experiences and narratives. The sources provide hints and explicit mentions of these real-world consequences of the powerful illusion and its subsequent end. Consider the common phenomenon of a relationship losing its intense spark after the initial phase, often following the establishment of physical intimacy or cohabitation. Schopenhauer would argue this is not just a psychological shift, but the dissipation of the species-driven illusion. Once the immediate biological imperative tied to that specific union is addressed, the overwhelming force that made the other person seem like the unique key to infinite happiness recedes. The individuals are left to confront each other and their own natures in their original limitation and misery. Without the dazzling cloak of the species, will obscuring incompatibilities or the fundamental suffering inherent in life. This explains why marriages concluded for love succeed, as a rule, unhappily. The instinctual illusion brings heterogeneous natures together for the sake of future generations, not for the present individual's lasting compatibility. The Spanish proverb, "Quien se casa por amores, ha de vivir con dolores," he who marries for love will live with sorrows, captures this perfectly. The sheer force of the illusion, even when it doesn't end in attainment, leads to tragic consequences documented in Schopenhauer's sources. When the illusion of infinite happiness through union is irrevocably denied, the suffering can be so immense that life loses all value, surpassing even the fear of death. This drives individuals to voluntary suicide. Schopenhauer mentions Werther and Jacopo Ortis, fictional characters whose fates reflect this reality. He notes that love denied leads many to madness. Even when the desired union occurs, if the true metaphysical purpose is thwarted, the illusion dissolves. Schopenhauer notes that the great passion subsides even in cases of female infertility, where the potential for offspring is nullified. Millions of sperm are destroyed daily, each carrying the same metaphysical principle, but their potential is unrealized. The will to live has inexhaustible occasions to reappear, but in that specific instance, the driving illusion fades when its potential outcome is blocked. The destructive potential of the force is highlighted in cases of violence. When the passionate lover cannot find acceptance, the intense feeling can turn to extreme hatred, leading to murder-suicides. Schopenhauer quotes Goethe, "For all scorned loves, for the infernal element, I would wish to know something worse, to curse." He argues that the coldness of the beloved can feel like wickedness because the lover is driven by an insect-like instinct that overrides all reason and self-preservation. They cannot do otherwise. In section Not Com, End of 5, End of Story. Example: Schopenhauer's Venetian Love. To illustrate the gap between the abstract philosophical truth and the messy reality of human experience caught within these drives, we can look at an anecdote mentioned in the introduction to the Metaphysics of Sexual Love. While it doesn't explicitly detail post-union disillusionment, it vividly portrays Schopenhauer himself, the philosopher who dissected the metaphysics of love, being caught up in its reality. After completing the first volume of The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer traveled to Venice in 1818. He describes the initial disorientation of being in a new place with a different language and customs, comparing it to falling into cold water. But then, adapting to the environment, he felt extraordinarily well, like the fish in cold water. This adaptation, however, wasn't purely abstract. It was facilitated by a young Venetian woman named Teresa Fuga. The source includes a letter from Teresa to Schopenhauer, written in 1819. The letter is described as a true biographical delicacy, written in picturesque grammar and reckless syntax. It speaks of their relationship, mentions competing suitors, Englishmen, and an impresario, and hints at her being quite amused. See trastuyaba abbastanza. She even seems to have supplanted other men in her life. What makes this anecdote particularly revealing, especially in the context of the metaphysics of sexual love, is the letter's address. All ornatus, Monsignor Arthur Scherenhans, sic posta restante Firenze. Not only does she misspell his name drastically, Scherenhans, instead of Schopenhauer, but she also gets the year wrong. Schopenhauer, known for being meticulous, even irritable about misspellings, must have been taken aback by this distorted address. He, who valued intellectual clarity and precise language, receives a letter from an object of his affection riddled with errors. Yet, the source notes, love made him close his eyes to everything, even to that incredible Scherenhans. He hurried back to Venice to see her. This personal story, occurring around the time he was deeply immersed in the ideas that would become the Metaphysics of Sexual Love, published in 1844 as a supplement to the main work, offers a fascinating, almost ironic counterpoint to the abstract theory. Here is the philosopher, dissecting the species-driven illusion, yet clearly subject to its power himself. His love for Teresa was strong enough to make him overlook linguistic sloppiness that would normally infuriate him. While the source doesn't say what happened after he returned to Venice, or if he experienced disillusionment with Teresa specifically, the inclusion of this story in the introduction to the chapter on sexual love hints at the human reality behind the theory. It shows how the powerful drive can indeed make individuals overlook inconsistencies and realities that would otherwise matter deeply, highlighting the illusion's initial blinding power. And it leaves open the possibility that, like Theseus or the singing bird, a different state followed the period of intense pursuit and union. The consequences of the powerful, illusion-driven pursuit of sexual love are evident in human experience, ranging from the commonplace fading of passion after union to tragic instances of madness, suicide, and violence when the illusion is denied. Even the philosopher who dissected this phenomenon appears to have been subject to its power in his own life, highlighting the pervasive nature of the will's drive. The philosophical aftermath. Beyond illusion. So, the illusion ends. The promised infinite happiness turns out to be a fleeting physical satisfaction, and the individual is left with disappointment. What is the philosophical takeaway from this end of the illusion? For Schopenhauer, this disillusionment serves as a stark reminder of the fundamental nature of life governed by the will to live. It reinforces his view that desire is a perpetual state of lack, and its satisfaction is merely a temporary relief, not a positive gain. The intensity of the love illusion is a powerful engine, but ultimately, it runs on the fuel of biological necessity, not the possibility of human bliss. The fading of the illusion reveals the underlying reality. Life is characterized by striving and suffering. The pursuit of love, perhaps the most potent and initially most convincing form of seeking happiness, ultimately falls prey to this fundamental truth. The individual, realizing they were primarily a means for the species, is left with the inescapable fact of their own transient existence and inherent misery. This understanding, while bleak, is crucial within Schopenhauer's broader philosophy. The end of the illusion can, in a sense, be a moment of potential awakening, a desengaño that clears the fog. Once the dazzling, deceptive light of the species will recedes, the individual is perhaps better positioned to see the world and themselves for what they are in Schopenhauer's view: manifestations of a blind, striving will in a realm of suffering. This is where the possibility of transcending the cycle comes into play, the negation or denial of the will to live. This denial is not achieved through the satisfaction of desires, which only feeds the will, but through a profound cognition or insight into the nature of the will and the suffering it entails. The disillusionment following the love illusion could potentially contribute to this insight. By seeing the fundamental deception at the heart of such a powerful drive, one might begin to question the value of all striving and all affirmation of the will to live. Schopenhauer notes that the truth he uncovered about the metaphysics of love should, more than any other means, make us capable of overcoming said passion if rational considerations have any power against it. However, he immediately follows this with a quote from a comic: "What has neither reason nor measure in itself, you cannot rule with reason." This highlights the immense difficulty of overcoming such a deeply rooted instinct, even with intellectual understanding. The end of the illusion provides the insight, but overcoming the will is a different, far more arduous task, requiring a turning away from all desire and self-affirmation. This understanding of the illusion in love also sheds light on other aspects of human behavior that seem driven by forces beyond rational self-interest. Schopenhauer, in an appendix, discusses pederastia as an example of a deviated instinct. While abhorrent, he analyzes it through his metaphysical lens, arguing it's a natural deviation employed by nature to avoid generating imperfect offspring, a prophylactic measure for the species. It's still the species' goal, albeit a negative one, being served by instinct even when it seems counterintuitive. This further underscores how profoundly the species' will, operating through instinct and often outside conscious reason, dictates behavior. Similarly, Schopenhauer's controversial views on women are rooted in this framework. He sees women as fundamentally closer to the species' will, nature's primary instrument for perpetuation. Their secret morality, unconscious but innate, is to prioritize the species' good over individual promises or duties. This perspective, while misogynistic in its expression, is consistent with his overall metaphysics of sexual love as a species-driven illusion using individuals as tools. The end of the illusion is not a final answer, but a revelation of the problem. It unmasks the most powerful drive as a fundamental deception about the nature of happiness and the purpose of life. This raw, exposed reality, stripped of the comforting illusion, aligns with Schopenhauer's overall diagnosis of the human condition as one of striving and suffering in a world without inherent meaning or ultimate purpose for the individual. The significance of this perspective, however, is not in its ability to provide easy answers or prescribe a path to conventional happiness. Schopenhauer offers no simple to-do list. His philosophy particularly the later essays, is described as less like an architectonic system and more like themes and variations, sometimes even dissonant, reflecting the unresolved nature of existence itself. The end of the illusion in love is one such powerful variation, a moment of stark clarity within the complex, often miserable symphony of the will to live. The end of the sexual love illusion serves as a potent illustration of Schopenhauer's view that life is inherently driven by a blind will not aimed at individual happiness and characterized by suffering. This disillusionment can potentially lead to a deeper insight into the nature of existence, opening the path toward the difficult practice of denying the will to live, although reason alone is often insufficient to overcome the deep-seated instincts. Lessons for the will to wisdom. So, what can we, seekers of the will to wisdom, take away from this deep dive into the end of the illusion in sexual love? Schopenhauer's analysis offers a challenging but potentially freeing perspective. 1. Be wary of the promise of infinite happiness. His philosophy suggests that the intense feeling of needing one specific person for absolute bliss is likely a powerful, biologically driven illusion designed to perpetuate the species. Recognizing this doesn't necessarily diminish the feeling, but it helps temper the expectation of it, leading to a permanent state of ecstatic fulfillment that overrides all other aspects of life's inherent difficulties. 2. Understand desire's nature. The disappointment after the illusion fades is a specific example of Schopenhauer's broader point. Desire is a lack, and satisfaction is temporary. True, lasting happiness isn't found by endlessly fulfilling desires, as new ones always arise or boredom sets in. This applies beyond sexual love to many pursuits in life. 3. The impersonal versus the personal. Schopenhauer forces us to confront the idea that powerful forces beyond our individual, conscious control are at play in our most intimate experiences. The spirit of the species has its own agenda, using us as tools. This challenges our anthropocentric view and can lead to a more humble, perhaps less self-important, understanding of our place in the natural world. 4. Disillusionment as potential insight. While painful, the end of the illusion can be a moment of clarity. It strips away a powerful deception and reveals from Schopenhauer's perspective the striving, suffering nature of reality. This desengaño is a key step toward potentially seeking something other than worldly fulfillment. 5. The challenge of the will. Schopenhauer is not offering a simple solution. Understanding the illusion doesn't automatically grant us control over the underlying will to live. Overcoming its drives, particularly the powerful one manifested in sexual love, requires a turning away, a denial, which is portrayed as extremely difficult and rare. His analysis, while perhaps focusing on a particularly controversial and raw aspect of human life, serves as a potent microcosm for his entire philosophy. It highlights the power of the will, the role of illusion, the reality of suffering, and the difficult path toward potential transcendence. It's a call to wisdom that begins not with optimistic promises, but with a clear-eyed, unflinching look at the often painful truth of what drives us. Schopenhauer's ideas, including his metaphysics of sexual love, have influenced thinkers and artists for generations, from Nietzsche and Freud to Jung, and those exploring existentialism and Eastern philosophy. His willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, even those about our most cherished illusions, continues to make him a compelling and challenging guide on the path to wisdom. Schopenhauer's Metaphysics of Sexual Love teaches us that the promise of infinite happiness through love is a powerful, species-driven illusion. Its inevitable fading reveals the underlying reality of suffering and the will's impersonal agenda. This disillusionment, while painful, can provide valuable insight into the nature of desire and existence, potentially pointing toward a different, more difficult path of wisdom that involves turning away from the will's relentless drive. We began with Schopenhauer's quote about the tree of knowledge having been plucked, suggesting that once we gain certain knowledge, we see things differently. His Metaphysics of Sexual Love, and particularly the concept of the illusion's end, is one such piece of knowledge. It might be a tough truth to swallow, perhaps challenging deeply ingrained beliefs about romance and happiness. But as your thought partner in navigating these complex ideas, my role is to present the information drawn from the sources supported and reasoned, strictly from sources. Schopenhauer invites us to look beyond the surface, beyond the dazzling appearances, and to understand the deeper, often unsettling forces at play. The end of the illusion in sexual love is not a sign of failure in love itself, but rather a revelation about the nature of the will that drives it and the world it creates. It prompts us to ask, if not in the fulfillment of such powerful desires, where, then, is true well-being to be found? This exploration is just one part of the vast landscape of Schopenhauer's thought. If this discussion has sparked your curiosity or challenged your perspective, I encourage you to delve deeper. What are your thoughts on the illusion of infinite happiness in love? Have you experienced this end of the illusion? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like and subscribe to The Will to Wisdom for more explorations into the world's most challenging and rewarding philosophy. Proscrim.